Seth and Sarah, thank you so much for being here today on the Ballet Science Podcast. I'm thrilled to have you here today.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, so for listeners who may be new to ORZA and the ORZA brand, can you each first introduce yourselves, share a little bit about your dance backgrounds, and then walk us through sort of your personal journey and how it led you to where you are today, and then ultimately the creation of the ORZA brand?
Oh, you start.
Okay, well, I'm not the creator. So my name is Sarah, and I was a principal dancer at Pacific Northwest Ballet for 13 years. Before that, I danced in York City Ballet for 6 years. So I really dedicated 20 plus years of my adult life to professional dancing. And then Seth had been working on his project of building this entirely new type of ballet shoe. And I watched him struggle with injuries and frustration at his footwear, and that there was nothing available to him to really meet his needs as a male dancer that, was dancing at the top of his game, extreme athleticism. And so when the company launched in 2023, everything kind of rapidly exploded, and there wasn't a major plan in place as to customer service. People are actually ordering the shoe. What do we do now? So I just basically jumped in, and I sit in the seat of customer service. So anytime somebody has a question about fit or returns or exchanges, they hear from me. I'm very passionate about it, about getting people in the right size, about really meeting people with warmth and kindness. We're a very small business, so it's really nice to be able to do that. So that's how I came to work with ORZA. And Seth and I should say that Seth and I met at the School of American Ballet at the summer courses when we were 13 years old. And we started dating when we were 16. So we have been together our entire lives, danced together, and now we do this together. So it's kind of wild.
Kind of is fitting. I'll just go a little bit about my background. I'm Seth. I'm the founder and CEO of ORZA. I started ballet when I was 4. I'm from a dancing family, actually. My parents were dancers. My 5 siblings were dancers. So I was born and bred in this industry. I danced kind of all around the Bay Area. I grew up in San Francisco and went to multiple schools there, and then ended up at San Francisco Ballet, and then eventually going over to New York and going to the School of American Ballet back in 94, I think was our first summer where we met. I was 12. And then I stayed the year in 1997, and then we got our jobs in 99 at New York City Ballet. I was there for about 8 years, and then transitioned to coming to the West Coast and joining Pacific Northwest Ballet. And I danced there for 14 years and went through the ranks. And but during my time, what made me go through redesigning a shoe was necessity. And it's something that I needed for myself. And it was all stemmed from an injury I had back in my New York City Ballet days, as kind of coming up through the core and being on stage and overuse and all those things that happen with being on stage and rehearsals and class and trying to keep your body at the peak physical state you can be in, and then your body kind of lets you down. And so at a certain point I ruptured my plantar fascia, and I was still dancing. I would go on stage and dance as hard as I could, and then I would get off and I could not walk, not one bit. I could not walk at all. And at a certain point I had to call it. And it was a really hard call to make as a dancer, because you just want to dance, and you just, no matter what.
Especially as a new dancer too, you're really trying to prove yourself and, a working part of the company. And
you want to be seen, and that's the hard part. But I eventually took time off and had a procedure done. That procedure actually didn't work. And at that point I came back, and the doctor and I, Dr. Philip Bauman in New York, was like, okay, you have to go to Dwayne Reed, you have to go to Walgreens, pick up any kind of padding that you can stuff in your shoe. And really, we went through probably 11 different manufacturers or brands, like Dr. Scholl's, orthotics, anything that we could find off the shelf, I was trying to put into my shoe.
Into the heel, right?
It was runners cups. I would try full sole, you name it, I was putting in my shoe. And that's kind of what started this process, even back in 2005. But after we found something that worked, it alleviated my pain, and I no longer had plantar fasciitis. I had no pain. I was back on stage, and my first shows back were R&J, Peter Barton's Romeo and Juliet. And that was the first time wearing it in my shoes. And on stage and like an actual performance doing Romeo. And from that moment forward, I was like, why doesn't this exist? Like, why are we so backwards from the athletic sportswear lines and all the different variety of sport gear that everyone has? At that point, when I was
You were watching other dancers do similar things.
Yeah,
Right? Other
and
male dancers
that
stuff
came in
stuff in their shoes.
that came into effect after I was wearing the shoe for about 5 years with this stuff in my shoes. Every show, every rehearsal, I was wearing this. And in 2010, the manufacturer actually discontinued what I was wearing, and I freaked out. This was when we were in Seattle, and we were dancing, and I was like, oh my gosh, what am I gonna do? Like, this is 2010.
And at that
This is
point,
what
you
happened.
had like knee injuries as well. Like you had like other injuries as
I
well.
was
So
getting older.
you were getting older, but it was like even more important that he was able to access this kind of padding to support his body at the very least.
Yeah, and I actually called this manufacturer and I was like, okay, I will take everything you have on hand, everything. Because I was like, I have probably 15 years left, which I was approximately right. And I will take everything you have on hand. And they're like, we sold everything. Everything is out of the warehouse. And what I was wearing was for runners. It wasn't great, but it worked for me, and it alleviated what I was going through, my pain and the difficulty I was going through. And that in that moment, I was working with our physical therapist at P&B, and we went down the same path again, going through PT magazines, all that stuff, going through what different heel cups we could wear or buy. We did the same exact thing, couldn't find anything that was comparable to what I was wearing. And at that point, my PT told me, like, why don't you just build this? Like, why don't you just make it from scratch? And I was like, and it was kind of like joking, and that was like the light bulb moment for me. It was like, why don't I try to create this? Like, why doesn't this exist? Like, why are we suffering as dancers and not having the equipment or tools? All this evolution in sports and football, basketball, soccer, rugby, like all these different sports are like,
you have these huge companies spending so much time, on R&D. It's how do we support these athletes? What kind of equipment do we get them to maximize their games? And here dancers are with the same shoe from 100 years ago, basically.
Yeah. So that was like the moment it started, was 2010. And I actually started building this as an idea in my head. I used to draw a lot as a kid. I really wanted to be a cartoonist, not really a dancer. It was like a very strange thing because I was born and bred in it, and I knew it. I knew everyone in the dance world, even at
So you're over it.
not over it. It wasn't as special until I went to New York. But I started sketching my ideas of combining like the way sneakers are built into a ballet flat, and kind of combining those two worlds, and just using like ripping apart a sneaker and seeing what's inside the back of it, and then ripping apart shoes or flats, ballet flats, and trying to figure out how to incorporate that kind of technology into it. And I actually started with cobblers in Seattle. That's where I started. I went to orthotic makers, like people that work for orthotics for normal people, getting orthotics put in their sneakers, their boots, whatever, and then actual cobblers. And they really are hard to find nowadays. Like, they don't exist, shoe cobblers, and started building prototypes at that point.
Because I just want to jump in because the idea was never just to like make a heel cup or make support and stick it on top of the shoe like he had been doing. It was to build this technology and then design a ballet shoe around that so that it wouldn't interfere with the aesthetic that, a ballet shoe has to still look like a ballet shoe. So yeah, he was like the technology.
And I was
at the
very
center.
hard pressed, and like no one could sway me from what I envisioned this being at that point, even that far back. So ORZA was incorporated in 2013, and at that point I was already prototyping, and we probably had a few different ways to build it because we
But
went
people were
through.
telling you couldn't build it. right? Like if you were getting pushback from,
That's
yeah.
starting in 2013 and 2014. I went to international manufacturers and really got a reality check. So I thought I could just design something out of sketches and like have one prototype and just go there and they would just be able to build it and know what I would want and how to do it. Because it's one thing to create a sample and then it's another thing to create an assembly line of this. It has to work for everyone that's working on it. It's a lot more complex than I realized. That's why it took 14 years to build it.
Well, you were also having a full-time career at the same time too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But with the focus on it over those 14 years, it was really keeping the tradition that everyone expects from a ballet shoe and not to be distracting, but to support the dancers or to support myself. Like that's really what I was trying to do is create this shoe so I could use it. I mean, that's what it was about. I was trying to solve my problem still. And then once this all started happening around 2010, I remembered all of my colleagues doing the same thing. Like at New York City Ballet, I would see different principals stuffing stuff in their shoe and doing the same thing I was doing. It was really just like, why doesn't this exist? And that's kind of what pushed me down the road of designing the shoe. And then just, yeah, hoping that I can get the right manufacturers, the right people behind it, the right engineers, and really understand that side of what I'm trying to do.
Great. Well, that is such a interesting journey for both of you to kind of like start off as this SAB romance. I love that. And then have your amazing careers and now have this incredible new product and business. Like, what an amazing story, and congratulations on
Thank you.
all of that.
Thanks.
And it's so interesting, sort of the origin story of your product was from, pretty much there was something you needed that didn't exist. And so
Yeah.
many great inventions come about that way. And I can only imagine the complexity of producing something like that. I've done research. We did some stuff on insoles and stuff like that. And even just the research that goes into studying something is so complex. But then creating and manufacturing a product, I can only imagine. So yeah, congratulations on all of
Thank
that. That is
you.
really
Thank you.
exciting. Yeah. So you have this new ballet slipper that you've designed. What makes your Orza shoes different from the more traditional ballet slipper?
Do you want to start with a traditional ballet slipper? Like today's slipper, the bulk of the changes have been to kind of move it towards thinner, lighter, right? So stretch canvas has really come into play. Companies have decided, like, let's just make it easier for dancers to point their feet, make it as sock-like as we can. So this generation of dancers, starting from a young age, that's all they know a dance slipper to be. That's what they expect from their slipper, to be really minimal, light, really hugs the arch, just almost like an extension of your sock, right? So what Orza is essentially saying is that I think that's a bit backwards in thinking. We're thinking that the athleticism in dance has increased exponentially in recent years. Dancers perform at a high level of athleticism. We know it's considered a high impact sport, right? So there's lots of studies showing the ratio of impact that dance and injuries that dancers have compared to, say, football players. And a ballet shoe should be supporting your body and working with your body. So what really differs about the shoe is the patented technology that is nestled inside. So from the outside, a lot of times we struggle. If we see our shoe in a picture, I'm like, is that our shoe? Because it really looks the same as other shoes from the outside, but we don't use a stretch canvas. We use a structured canvas. It was a necessity to hold the technology in place. But what we've also come to really believe is that better to have a little bit of resistance in your shoe. We talk a lot about dancers who are going to go on point, right? And so I get a lot of feedback from parents who are, transitioning their dancer in, say 12, 13 years old, and the shoe feels stiff. And the shoe does start out stiff, and there's a bit of a break-in period. And we know controlling a point shoe, like the box, the toe point, the vamp of a point shoe, is really tough to control. So the leap now that dancers are making, going from a stretch canvas, really thin shoe, to a point shoe, is really vast, right? And a lot of historically, when we were growing up, like leather shoes with a full sole was often required at dance studios, with that kind of same mentality of let's let some muscles develop. And as you're doing those fondus every day at bar, let's also be working the foot. So there's kind of a twofold benefit of this, in our opinion, of having the structured canvas and having a little bit more structured of a shoe, and then you get the metatarsal padding and the triple layer of shock absorption in the heel.
I can talk a little more into what is actually inside the shoe.
Yeah, and what's really different about the shoe. Yeah.
And I have one right here. And again, it's very malleable,
compressible,
and looks like a normal ballet flat, and it performs like a ballet flat. And that was the thing.
And it is split sole.
Yes, it is split sole. But so in the back, this is the part that's kind of like a sneaker where there's a counter here. And a counter of a shoe is, again, a running shoe or a boot. There's a counter that actually
like
goes in
this. And you can, if you could feel it, it was a little resistant.
Yeah, and then we have 3 layers of shock absorbing material, of foams that are like EVAs, but it's actually an extra step that we did manufacturing wise to make it lighter weight and then also more rebound from the foams.
And the counter is to stabilize. And really, so because we didn't want it to be wobbly.
That's the whole internal system. So, and it's built within the shoe. So it's part of the shoe. And so while I was going to manufacturers trying to have this created, they would take a pre-existing shoe and then they would slap pad on it, like just right on top. And that's exactly what I did not want to do. I wanted it all internal. I wanted the dancer to look at this and just be like, oh my gosh, that's amazing that they got this in there somehow. There's no material. This is what was the really hard part about building this, is that there's no material. It's 2 pieces of canvas. That's it, to hide the technology inside. And then we have a layer, the EVA in the metatarsal section as well. And the whole assembly process of this changed. So from a regular ballet shoe, the way that they assemble it on the assembly line, it's completely different. And I didn't know how handcrafted ballet shoes are.
You always think of point shoes as like made by hand, but these are essentially made by hand on last.
And there's a lot of people that touch the shoe to make it come to fruition. Yeah, I mean, I didn't realize. So every part of this, I've been to every manufacturer in Thailand. I picked every single color, all the pieces. I really wanted to get a gist of how it works on the manufacturing side, being in factories, and really getting it right. And that was really important for me through the journey. And maybe I'm really, really picky, but that's just something that I can't not do. I don't know. It's like throughout my dance career, I was a certain way.
Dancers are perfectionists. Let's just leave it at that. And it carries over into second careers.
Yeah.
But the cool thing is that the sneakers were actually made in a former Nike factory. And we have engineers who were former Nike employees. So there is really this connection between that sneaker technology and what we're doing here with the ballet shoe.
Yeah, we ended up in Thailand in 2018 and then built through all of COVID. And really the first version was built all through COVID, through Zooms, through this new way of talking to people, because we couldn't go over to Thailand. Everything was locked down. And then finally when it opened back up, that's really when things started moving a lot faster, because I could go there and actually work with the engineers and team over there. So
incredible. And thank you so much for showing the shoe. That's very helpful. Visuals are always great. Yeah. So, because I was wondering where exactly that padding or the EVA, I think you called it, is. So thank you so much for that explanation. And I love too that you kept pointing out that it's, the technology is integrated into the shoe. It's not some separate thing you wear inside your shoe that could shift around or something like that.
Yeah.
So that's also, to me, as a former dancer, very interesting, because that's something we worry about.
Exactly. And that was my experience with what I was using previously. Was it would move around. I would be on stage and even just partnering, and the whole heel cup would either slide because of sweat or tights or whatever, and it would just move. And then I'd be on stage and like, oh no, what am I going to do? And that's something that always was in my mind. Like, I cannot sell this product. Like I could have just slapped something into it, but that's just not what I wanted to do.
Not good enough.
I wanted to actually evolve the ballet shoe and not just put a Band-Aid on it.
Exactly. And yeah, like you also pointed out, we're so concerned about aesthetics in ballet, and that really limits our ability to add technology into shoes. I've talked about this some more so about point shoes in some of my previous episodes. So I'm really glad we're talking about that even with the ballet slippers, what we call sometimes flat shoes.
Yep.
So yeah, it's for both types of shoes. We have those limits because like you said, we're so focused on the keeping the shape of the foot and being able to show the shape of the foot that you can't really slap on a bunch of extra padding or things that can go into like a running shoe that's less concerned with something like that.
Right.
So yeah. So that's amazing you created this shoe.
Thank
Have you done any kind of like official testing on it, like from more of a research science perspective?
I could definitely dive into that. So the first time we did testing was with a place here, Potentrix, and that was the first time because in 2013 I was really not doubting myself, but more of like, is this gonna work?
You needed to know that there was like a market for it and that it was really going to
And
have some impact.
and make a difference.
Yeah.
And I was connected with them, and we did our first testing with very preliminary testing and shoes and technology and they were like our prototypes. Like before it looked like this, it did not look like this, but it had the same concept and the design was there. And we tested it, and it showed that there is something to it. And that really gave me the momentum I needed, or
The assurance to go, okay,
Yeah.
yes, this is
There is
giving us
something.
data to show differences. Yeah.
So I just pushed along from that. And then we just did a biomechanics study recently in 2025 and did it with, I think, 60 dancers.
So we're partnered with the University of Puget Sound out here in Seattle. Karen Steer is a PT and professor, and she is spearheading that. And she has a research team of grad students who we have some preliminary stuff, and then we're pushing it further now. We have survey results, but that is all. I just jumped in, but yes, that's where we're at. But that's what's hugely exciting is that Karen is involved and the university is involved, and that's very much a big part of our whole process. And we just don't want to make unsubstantiated claims. That's never been our MO. So we are really excited to get that feedback. And so, we have so much anecdotal feedback from dancers and users that really blows our minds. But that is a really key piece, to have real biomechanic and field studied feedback.
Yeah, and with Karen and she knew about this back in 2010. So she worked on my shoulder. I tore my shoulder back then, completely tore it. But she was working on me, and this was just the idea. And I was talking with her about it, and she was like, "Well, the university I'm working for, we could do like this and this." And the shoe just took a really long time, and we're finally there where we're doing the survey studies, now the biomechanic, and a lot of our partners with different schools and institutions are part of the survey. So
we have dancers in our shoe. It'll, several pretty prestigious schools, and so their own internal PT departments were really excited to watch this feedback happen in real time and following cohorts that are at the shoe.
Yeah, and we started our first survey section. It was more about like comfort and like the difference that you feel right out of the gate, opening the box. But now we've kind of evolved that study, and we're going to go more to injury prevention and the longevity side of it. And then the biomechanics, will continue that with the university, and we're actually going to collaborate with with the Children's Hospital here and use hopefully P&B dancers. And then they have a mobile biomechanics lab that we can actually do in the studio setting, which would be a lot better than the biomechanics lab.
We were having dancers have to trek out there, and they were lovely and gracious to do it, but this makes it easier.
Also, the biomechanics lab is not set for ballet dancers. Like that kind of studying hasn't really been done, and we're really want it to be the best data that we can get. And in the biomechanics lab, it's kind of limiting with the way that it's made for runners. It's made for athletes, people that are in parallel and are just kind of more normal strides.
Yeah, we need to encompass a lot broader of a dynamic of movement with dance. But I just wanted to say we did get this from the initial survey. Karen was like, "You guys, this is phenomenal, and this is a piece that you can share." We did this independent survey, and we found that 88%, I'm reading this, so 88% of users indicated that the ORZA shoe was more comfortable than their traditional shoe, and 99% reported improved body sensation at the end of the day after wearing the ORZA Ballet shoe.
Yes, that's excellent feedback for sure. That is very exciting that you're kind of in the middle of that biomechanics study. So I have a biomechanics background. That's what I got my
Okay.
PhD in. So
Yeah.
I'm very into biomechanics. And that being said, it takes so long. It's a very time-consuming, long-term, project to do something like that, to truly do it well and get enough data and then analyze that data. So it'll be
Yeah.
very exciting when you get the results from that. And then who knows, it might even get like published in a scientific journal or something like that. That'd be very, very exciting. So I
Yeah.
can't
That's the
wait to see
hopes.
that.
Yeah, that's Karen's hopes, and it's definitely we are a slow road, right? Like it's not something that we will be able to turn around and have super quickly. We know that.
Yeah, people don't always understand that. They're like, "Well, where's the data?" It's like,
Right,
Yeah.
right,
it takes a
right.
long time.
It
Like, do
takes
you
a lot.
understand, especially biomechanics, like the
Right.
equipment you use in biomechanics, it collects just enormous amounts of
Right.
data. And so, and then even once you collect it, you have to process it, analyze it, and
Yeah.
then
That's
type it up
why
into a publication.
I think at the same time she's also doing the survey. We're doing the survey as well to get
Yeah.
some quicker feedback,
And
right?
they're already presenting at a few conferences right now with the data that they pulled from the preliminary biomechanics. And right now, what they're presenting is more of that there's no immediate.
The biomechanic feedback that we got showed no change to how the dancers
Yeah.
are enacting their movement. So we are not interrupting the natural flow of how dancers need to move to perform their movements, which initially we were like, oh, don't we want to like disrupt? But after Karen was like, no, we actually don't. This is great. We are not interrupting the flow, right? We're we're providing support as they do it, but it's not disrupting the biomechanic process.
And that goes into the design of the shoe when I was designing it. I didn't want it to be something that the dancer had to think about. Like, oh, I have my shoes on, like I have to think about this. No, I wanted it to be just a part of the body. And that's the whole premise of the whole integrated system, is that it just is part of your heel. Once you are acclimated to wearing it, you don't even think about it.
You also mentioned, I guess you've gotten some anecdotal, feedback, maybe from some dancer friends or students, or do you have any specific examples of sort of what you're just hearing,
Yes.
maybe
Yes.
anecdotally from dancers?
I totally geek out on this, and we sit in two very different seats, and so I get all this feedback through customer service, and we have a third party app that independently collects feedback from dancers who are in the shoe. So I did pull a few things. I mean, the very first thing when Seth launched the shoe, we had this incredibly fascinating and just kind of mind blowing experience. I had a parent reach out to us, somebody at here in Seattle, because a teacher at PNB had said to her, this might help your daughter Maria. And Maria had not been able to complete a class in 4 months due to something that was going on in the back of her foot. And so the mom reached out and said, could I get Maria fit? I sent Seth over to PNB. She was a really young girl still. The shoe was like a little bit, our first iteration, the OP1 was a bit big of a shoe. We've since revamped it in the 2.0 and made it more foot hugging and streamlined, but he fit Maria. A few days later, I heard from her mom, and she said Maria finished class in those shoes, and she has continued to finish class in these shoes. So that was that was Seth's experience when he wore the heel cups, right? And as he just, walked us through, that's what led to that. But that was just real. That's like one of our trademark stories that I love to share because it was making an impact in a young dancer's life. This was not who Seth initially built the shoe for. He built it for like himself and male dancers, but to know that a young student was able to finish class after months of not being able to, that was huge.
And it was at that point, this was so early on within the launch of when we launched in March 2023, that hearing and actually talking to the student, it was just amazing that it works for her because
Right.
I didn't know if this would actually work for everyone. And what we're seeing is that you wear the shoe, you'll have a positive impact.
So we just had this interesting feature in the New York Times, and the author spoke to some dancers at New York City Ballet, including Miriam Miller, who's been wearing the shoe. And we knew Miriam, she had reached out to us and said the shoe is just really was instrumental in getting me back from my injury. And her feedback that she shared to Gia was really interesting because, well, I'll just share it and then just see what you think. So Miriam Miller, I'm reading again, this is from the New York Times. So Miriam Miller, a City Ballet principal, started wearing ORZA shoes to help with Achilles tendonitis. Now she can, quote, plie properly without popping my heels off the floor. I'm able to keep the sole of the shoe on the floor because it does have a little bit of a lift. So I think that I've built strength in a different way without using my calf to plie and point all the time. That has led her to using bigger muscles, her glutes, her hamstrings, her quads in smarter ways. It's changed the way she jumps. Miller has more power in her legs and feet, which gives her a greater sense of lightness, one bound by strength. So, I mean, there are just a couple of things that stand out because I know we're sitting here saying like it doesn't biomechanically change the way you use your body, but she's very much saying that it did bring an awareness to her to use some of those bigger muscles, which I'm not a PT, but I think we want to use big muscles, right? Because it takes strain off the little muscles. So that was just really interesting feedback for her to share that. And in turn, that allowed her Achilles to heal, which is what, the tendonitis to abate. So, and I have a couple more. So this is from a verified user, and she says, the only ballet slippers that genuinely changed my relationship with pain. I struggled with a very sensitive metatarsal area for a long time, and most ballet shoes felt too thin. Instant pain. ORZA completely changed that for me. The support and padding are thoughtfully designed, not excessive, not minimal, just right. The pressure is distributed in a way that protects the metatarsals without taking away floor feel or articulation. From the first weeks of use, my metatarsal pain was almost completely gone. That alone is huge, but on top of that, the shoes feel stable, supportive, and professional. They allow me to dance confidently instead of constantly thinking about my feet. If you have sensitive metatarsals, foot pain, or feel like you've tried everything, I genuinely recommend ORZA. These shoes didn't just improve my comfort, they improved my dancing. And one more. So this person says, game changer for comfort and jumps. I absolutely love these shoes. They're amazing. The padding under my toes on typical ballet shoes was always uncomfortable and releve. Could feel the end of the padding and the bunched up canvas. With ORZA Pro 2.0, that problem is completely gone. The padding is perfect and provides just the right amount of support, especially for jumps. I didn't realize how much I needed that extra cushioning until now. I can jump without hesitation. Then she says, I also have a 12-year-old daughter who does ballet and wears a size 8 street shoe. When she saw my shoes, she wasn't impressed at first. And this is something we run into with students who really are used to that thin, soft-like shoe. But the other day, she needed to borrow a pair of shoes, so I loaned her my size 9s, and after wearing them in class, she claimed them as hers. She absolutely loves them too. Size 9 is perfect for her. So that's just that's a sampling. And yeah, so to completely change someone's relationship with their ballet shoe, their relationship with dancing, to minimize pain for people, right? We don't on our website say like, we're going to remove all your pain and change your relationship with dancing. But to have those anecdotal reviews from people in the shoe, that's everything.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah, that is great. And what wonderful feedback to be getting about, your baby essentially that you created.
Right.
Yeah, that's so exciting.
We do get feedback because it's the traditional canvas that it feels stiff. When you take it out of the box and put it on, it doesn't feel like my other shoes. That like, especially for a certain demographic, younger dancers who are just really used to that ease, like we talked about, there's definitely, it's not always easy and it's not always love at first wear. To be just really transparent and honest, because I think that's important.
But every part of the shoe was chosen specifically for a reason. And that even goes into the canvases. Because I tried every single version that you can think of this. I have like probably 30 right there, and then 4 garbage bags full of prototypes of just different versions, different thicknesses, where padding goes, where padding doesn't go, stretch canvas versus not stretch canvas, what works and doesn't work. And we've tried everything, from materials to ways to build it. So
right, and we do get people will make suggestions of like things we could do differently and stuff, and we always listen. It doesn't mean we're going to make the change.
Great, yeah. I think it's so interesting that from like as dancers, we're so into like preventing injuries, obviously. from the get-go, but then also just, injuries are probably going to happen, overuse injuries especially. And so then it sounds like this shoe could potentially kind of help with both keeping injuries from happening and also alleviating some pain that is already, going on from a current injury. So very exciting to see where all this goes and especially, your research study that's going on. And I was thinking, and you mentioned how, currently it's showing that your shoe is not affecting, I guess, the dancing, which is what you would want, like you said. So you don't want it to be like impacting, like you can't dance as well, you can't jump as well, or point your
Right.
foot
You
as
don't
well,
want the
whatever.
movement to be affected.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, you have to keep the aesthetic and then also
Yep.
the movement quality, I guess. And so that is very good. But then it would be interesting, in the future to do some comparison studies like, okay, this shoe versus this shoe, maybe even on the same person.
And that's what
Like,
we're doing actually. So we're doing that.
yeah,
So
great.
we're doing the comparison study, and that was actually compared to whatever the dancer brought in for that biomechanics study. We would do the biomechanics
In our
segment.
shoe,
Yeah,
and then again in
yeah.
their
So
whatever
that they could
soft shoe they were
pull
wearing. Yeah.
the data and compare. And we'll continue to do that even with the survey studies. We're doing it where we'll have people in the ORZAs and then dancers or students in other shoes as well, because we want all the data that we can collect.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah.
I cannot wait to see your results and nerd out on them.
Me too.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
So, how did you incorporate feedback you've received from dancers into the design of both the current shoe and maybe even like the very first one and sort of the progression of the shoe over time?
So this was very involved with a lot of my friends that were dancers, and I would test this on my friends from the get-go. So the first prototypes I did were tested on one of my colleagues there, and he would wear the prototypes in class and then give me this input, and then we would change either materials of foam. This is very, very early on samples, and we would change different foams from polyurethanes to pylon to different things that would range, and it would just get his experience because I knew my experience, but I wanted a non-biased opinion on these and like stabilization. And I'd have multiple dancers wearing these. And then after my international travels, I'd get samples pretty frequently. And we would I would put them on different males in P&B and say like, okay, what don't you like and what do you like about this? And kind of evolve what we were doing design wise and incorporating different things. And then even to the point where in 2018, we were still doing that. And I would get samples from different manufacturers and have my friends wear it either in the studio or on stage. And then really when things started revving up with Thailand, I would actually send these once they were looked pretty much almost done with the design. And it was just the internal components that we were working on with either the durometers or the thicknesses of the EVAs and what people liked most. I would send them to different dancers in LA, City Ballet, and just get feedback and then make those iterations into the shoe to make the first ORZA Pro 1. And then even from there, we were getting feedback right away that
After we launched
after we
OP1.
launched. And I knew certain things already that we would get comments on, like the aesthetics, the vamp, different
Mostly
things.
around the fit, because that has a really OP1 was essentially built on his foot,
Yeah.
and he has long toes, a meaty foot, and so the overall shape of the foot. And it only launched in one width, didn't have extended sizes, didn't have all the colors. So literally, I'd say like just mere months after OP1 launched, and we started getting feedback, we were already in development. Like, okay, we're going to have to tweak and do a 2.0 really quickly. So we turned that around. None of the technology is different. So the internal components, all of those remain the same through the two different versions. This was just all about the fit and reaching more people with the way the shoe fits and the sizing and the
Right.
width.
And with the ORZA Pro 1, at that point in 2022, I think when I could keep prototyping this forever. So we really needed to launch and actually get real world feedback.
From more than just our, studio buds
Yeah, because
that
I was
can be.
very, very quiet about this for a really long time, and my internal friends knew about it, and it was very quiet purposefully. And at that point in 2022, it was
It's
like,
time to hit go.
yeah, it was like the pressure of like, all right, this is way too long now. Let's like get it out there. It looks viable. And then from there, we'll already start adjusting. And really, we were getting feedback from city ballet dancers. When I was actually boots on the ground, I was in New York when we launched. We went everywhere. And I would just pull that feedback from them, or I'd have Zooms or calls with them and really just take their feedback and say, you know what, we're doing that. Like we're gonna do this. Like we hear you. Like yes, I agree completely. Like
And I think I'm just gonna like pat his back here because I think, for a lot of people that create something or that something's their own, there's like the idea of like, nobody's gonna tell me what to do. This is how we're gonna do it. And Seth has 100% open mind and really takes feedback in, even when it's critical, right? And I imagine it's hard to like your critiques of something that you've worked so hard on, but he's like, no, like let's think about it. Let's talk about it. How do we make it better? Which I think is such an important part of ORZA's success, right? That he is at his core always going back to the dancer. This is for the dancers. This how do we make it better for the dancers versus like, it's fine. It's good enough. Just, that's it. Take it or leave it.
Yeah, that is great. And you're so right. I guess as dancers, we actually learn how to take criticism
Yeah.
pretty
It's
early,
a
I
good
guess.
skill.
So, because I always feel the same way, like, bring it on. Like, what are your thoughts? Like, I want to
Right.
know, I want to get better. So
right.
that's great. And Seth, it's so cool. Like, you essentially did your own research study kind of to start, it sounds like almost.
Yeah, and even
You
going,
had your participants who are your
yeah,
friends, but that's like principal dancers in major companies. I
yeah,
mean, that's sort of the dream. As again, having done research, it's hard to get people
Mm.
to like do stuff like that. So that's
yeah.
really incredible that you did that and then got the feedback and were able to use it for your, I guess, is the Pro 2 your current model?
Yes.
We call that our flagship shoe. Yes, the ORZA Pro 2.0.
And really, it's just so we can have a bigger reach. Like that's what the 2.0 is. It's more sizes. You have narrows, mediums, and wides, and we can fit anyone now. And before with the OP1, it was a medium width and it was just wide, and it was just we couldn't fit it. I would turn people away when I was fitting that. We could just be like, "Wait, we have something in the queue. It's coming, but I will not sell you these." Like we need to fit you in something. I don't want the teachers to be like, what is that baggy thing that you have on? And that was the thing for me. It's like, just wait 6 months down the road, we can get you one. And we were actually in London in September and went to English National Ballet and we found a fit for 72 students, like every single one we could fit. And before it would be like a third of that we'd be able to fit. So, because everyone's feet are so different.
That's great. Yes. And yeah, such a good point that, I mean, again, when you think back to the origin story of all of this, like it started with your foot.
Yeah.
So it would make sense that your first model would be more for that type of foot. And now
Yeah.
you've created another one, which is more versatile or,
Yep.
you know, for everyone. So that's really, really great and how exciting. So you mentioned that, your shoe has different fabric, different technology integrated into it. And, there are so many different brands out there of ballet slippers. And yet, Seth, you felt like what you needed for your foot didn't exist. So you had to create something. Why do you think other companies haven't tried this themselves yet?
I would say, in my experience, so going all the way back even to my adolescence, this was San Francisco Ballet, I was already stuffing silicone gels in my shoes. And even back then, there was nothing available. But I think it's because brands don't have to change and they think that the status quo is fine. And that's what is the standard and why change something? Because it takes a lot of years and it takes R&D and it takes capital to do so. And I feel like with what they have right now, they're just like, it's fine. I think things have gotten cheaper, and then the variety of styles and materials, it's all more about margins than the dancer themselves.
So there are several legacy brands that dominate the dance shoe market. And it's very clear that they're was not a desire to create something new specifically with the ballet shoe, which is oft forgotten, right? The point shoe is the real diamond of the ballet shoe industry. And I think to a certain degree, the ballet shoe just got forgotten. And I think that these brands are not led by dancers, which is a really key piece of the puzzle. So if you haven't literally walked in those shoes, you're really missing the whole opportunity to understand fundamentally what is missing from the product. So I've quoted the New York Times article. I'm going to do so again because the author interviewed David Wilkenfeld, who's the creative director of Block, a dance footwear and apparel company, one of those legacy brands. And he agreed that, I'm quoting now, agreed that not many advances had been made in men's ballet shoes, but he wondered if drastic changes were necessary or even welcome. Why fix it if it's not broken, he said. So I think essentially we've also thought that too, that like you said, they didn't see that there was a problem maybe. Why spend all this time and energy on a piece of equipment that is a bit of an afterthought in their minds and maybe dancers' minds, because that's what tradition has led us to believe. But as Seth experienced firsthand, the product was very much broken. And so hence, let's actually put some effort into it and create something new.
And it's also needed. And dancers want this type of equipment. They want the tools to make their careers less painful.
Right. Everybody wants to dance
Longevity.
longer and stay on stage
Yeah.
longer. So what are the things we can do for dancers to make that happen? And I don't know that those are the questions that are being asked by the legacy brands. I think probably the internal questions are a little different. Maybe I'm wrong, but clearly there was like a disconnect between the ballet shoe and what people wanted to make of it.
That's all very interesting. And yes, while I would agree that, there's no need to like reinvent the wheel if it's working, I think the key here is that, you guys are dancers and you understand what dancers need and want. But yeah, I think it's great that you guys have done this, and definitely there's a need for it, and so much focus, like you said, gets put on point shoes.
Yeah. And there's so much like mystique around the point shoe, right? Like everybody's fascinated by it. They're just an interesting thing, even to non-dancers, right? And when you think of ballet, everybody's like, oh, you walk on your points, so.
That, and then also too, I feel like people focus more on point-related injuries even, like, oh, well, how are your point shoes injuring you? What do we need to fix there? When, like you said, and clearly, Seth, from your experience, I mean, you get injured in flat shoes too.
Yep.
Right. And the interesting thing, because he built this for male dancers, and we were really, I think Seth was thinking like, this is who's going to buy and wear the ballet shoe. But what we didn't really anticipate, and what we're really thrilled about, is how many female dancers, and like, I don't know why we weren't really thinking about that, but we've been totally overwhelmed by like, yes,
And
everybody wears the ballet shoe. Anybody who dances wears a ballet shoe. Like, this is for everybody. This is for
it was a
female
really
dancers.
nice surprise at launch. Like, we did a certain amount of inventory for male, female, and we were out very
And the
quickly.
female first. Yes, for sure.
female.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously we're learning so much as we go.
That is great. And I mean, everyone wears these flat, as we call them, flat ballet
Yeah.
slippers.
Yeah.
So yeah, it makes total sense that you'd have clients of all kinds. Looking ahead, any plans for other products or other things to incorporate, or anything going on currently?
For the brand, I mean, we would love to expand into other shoes. Our focus right now is the ORZA Pro 1 and ORZA Pro 2.0, and then kind of diversifying into younger ages.
Right. I was going to say, right on the docket right now is a children's line. So, essentially same technology, a much smaller profile of a shoe, and tweaks to make it really child friendly. But we're looking at ages 3 through 9 to reach there, essentially. So that, and then on in terms of further development, I get emails all the time like, are you going to make a jazz shoe? Are you going to make a character shoe? So, this is the internal technology we have the patent on, right? So we want to put that in as many different styles of shoes as we can. We just have to grow intelligently and in a timely, methodical manner. So, but yes, we would love to really expand all of this into footwear to reach just the whole spectrum of dancers and different styles of dance.
Great. Yes, that's very exciting and can't wait to see your new products in the future. So for your shoes that you have right now, where can people purchase them if they're interested in trying them out?
Yeah, we primarily sell online through our website right now. And if anybody has questions on fit, they contact customer service, they get me. We do some back and forth, figuring out sizes. We've made it really easy. We do free returns and exchanges. We provide the return label, and we're available in some select reseller locations. We do pop-ups. We have a growing network of, we call them ORZA reps, and they host pop-ups. We have a page on our website where you can find where the next pop-up might be in your area. So we are looking to, with the ORZA Pro 2.0, we're slowly expanding into resellers across the US. Just the dance shoe as it is has been for a very long time. I think it's used to being a certain price point and being a very certain kind of an afterthought, right? And I think that landscape is taking a bit more time to adopt such a new product.
Great. Well, I will definitely put a link to your website in the episode description for this podcast episode so people can check it out. If listeners want to connect with you or learn more about ORZA shoes, where else can they find you online besides your website?
They can follow us on Instagram. We have a lot of content that's always going out during basically every day. We're on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok. There's a wide network of people on there sharing our contact our content. Yeah, I think that's it. I mean, really,
Yeah.
it's our website. It's our social channels. It's me at customer service. I'm always happy to help and connect.
Awesome. Well, Seth, Sarah, this has been a total pleasure talking with you today and learning all about your brand and sort of how it started, where it is now, and your wonderful shoe that so much thought and time and effort has been put into. And yeah, I can't wait to see what is next for ORZA.
Thank you so much for
Thank
having us,
you.
Caroline. It was our pleasure, really.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And that concludes my conversation with Seth and Sarah Orza. I hope you enjoyed our conversation as much as I did. Thank you for joining me today for the Ballet Science Podcast. Whether you are a dancer, teacher, student, or simply curious about the mechanics behind movement, I appreciate you being here today. Each week, we'll explore the intersection of science and ballet, from injury prevention and biomechanics to nutrition, mindset, and everything in between. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow this podcast, leave a review, and share it with your friends and dance community. If there are specific topics you'd like to hear about in future episodes, feel free to share them in the comments below. You can also follow Ballet Science on social media and visit our website at ballet.science for additional information. Thank you again for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you next time on the Ballet Science Podcast.